I'm Steve Kaiser, and I'll got a bunch of veterans together here for Veterans Day program for 2018. I guess we'll start with what's your name and the branch of service you was in, and your rank, and where did you serve? Bob?
Okay, I'm Bob Donner, and I served in the Army in 1965 to 67. Went to Vietnam in the end of January of 1966 and served till first part of February of 67. Finished the rest of my 2-year hitch in Alabama, and I was a Spec 4 when I come out of Vietnam, and that's where I stayed. Anything else?
No. Thank you. Philip?
I'm Philip V. Donner. I was drafted in the Marine Corps February 13th, 1952. Did my basic training in San Diego. And I shipped our outfit to Hawaii for 6 or 8 months. And then we came home, was on leave for 30 days. And they called us back. They called the commandant of the Marine Corps and wanted to know if they had a company that would go to Japan. So they loaded us on the boat and spent our last 6 months over there in Japan. And got out on February 13th, 1954. And I was proud to serve in the country, and I was a PSC as far as I got.
Steve Hillis, United States Navy, enlisted in 1970, retired in 2000. Have a wife that was also in the Navy for 8 years as a physician, and have a son that is currently serving at the Air Force Academy. My dad was in the Army Air Corps World War II, so we're kind of a family of folks that serve in the military. 29 different countries. I was the Pacific Fleet Master Chief when I retired, which is the senior enlisted guy west of the Mississippi for the Navy.
What rank?
E9.
E9.
Yep. Fleet Master Chief, that's it. I understand sometimes you Army guys have a hard time understanding that, but think of the Sergeant Major working for the 4-star. Old, tired, and decrepit.
Thanks, Steve. Tom?
Tom Lang. I served in the U.S. Navy from 69 to 73 on board the USS Kansas City, which we commissioned in Boston. The first year I was in the Navy, so I was on board a new ship the whole time, which was real nice. Served 3 tours in Vietnam, off the coast of Vietnam. We were home based out of the Philippines, Subic Bay, and then we go online for 6 months at a time and supply the aircraft carriers, destroyers, or any escort ship with everything from bombs to Coca-Cola, and got out in 73. Was proud to serve my country. I have one thing I'd like to say is I understand why they have a volunteer service, and I think those guys are very honorable, but I still believe that everybody in this country should serve their country in some form. They could sit behind a desk or do whatever they want, but it's like the saying goes, freedom is not free. And I was an E4 when I got out.
I'm Joe Zimmerman from St. Helena, Nebraska. I was drafted into the Army in April of 1967, and I served till 1969. I went to Vietnam on February the 5th. I flew there in 1968 and never did get where I was supposed to go there. My orders read Long Bin. But the captain, or the pilot, came on the plane and he said, we're changing course, we're going to Camp Long Bay, they're blowing up the airport at Long Bin. So I never did get where I was supposed to go in Vietnam. So but it was, my introduction to Vietnam was, there was a lot of confusion because there was a whole plane load of people that wasn't supposed to be there. So, but I obtained the rank of sergeant, and I got was discharged in 69. So,
Thank you, Joe. Dean?
I'm Dean McGregor. I was drafted into the Navy in 1955, November, on Veterans Day. I took my boot camp in San Diego. After boot camp, I was sent to Atsugi, Japan, an Air Force, our air transport squadron for the Navy. I ended up there the whole tour of the duty that I had. Achieved the rank of Aviation Machinist Mate 3rd Class, Petty Officer. Never was aboard ship, although I was in the Navy. The only, well, I should say they transported me home from Japan on an aircraft carrier. But had very good duty. We supported the troops in Korea or Philippines, Hong Kong, Okinawa. Spent my survival school training in Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa. Other than that, I flew on the safest airplane you could ever have. We hauled coffins, we hauled airplane engines, passengers. Never had seats in the airplane, passengers just sat alongside. Other than that, I had the safest wartime experience that anybody could ask for.
Thank you, Dean. I'm Steve Kaiser. I was drafted into the Army in July of 1968 and went to Vietnam in March of 69 and got discharged in March of 70. I did rank of Staff Sergeant. So now, Bob, would you want to go through and kind of talk about what you did while you was in it?
Well, I said, when I got to Vietnam, and got stationed around and everything, I ended up, in fact, I should tell you, I was a crew chief on a Huey. And when I first got to Vietnam, I had no orders to where I was supposed to go or what, I had no idea what I was supposed to do. So anyway, they put me in a outfit up there. I flew, crewed a VIP chopper, and we flew all over the northern part of Vietnam. And I wish I could remember to this day all the places that I was in and out of, and that went on for about, I think, a month or so. I can't remember for sure. But anyway, then my orders finally come through, and I got sent 100 miles south of Saigon in the Mekong Delta, and I was a crew chief on a medevac, a dust-off chop. And that's where I spent all my time then, and all the trips and stuff that we had to make. It was between 400 and 500 missions that I flew with the chopper, because the crew chief always had to go with him. And anyway, was shot up quite a few times. And anyway, one of the times we had to go in, and well, most of the time when we had always a hot LZ, and anyway, it ended up, and most of the time we had gunships escort us in and out. And, I had quite a few different times that you get out into the rice paddy picking up wounded. You ended up and you lost all your communication with your chopper because you had to unplug your helmet because the cords weren't long enough. And anyway, one of the worst ones that I ever had was went out and was supposed to try to pick up some high-ranking officer. They had him captured, and we were supposed to go in and try to pick him up or get him out. Well, it ended up in the gunships and stuff all went in and tried to get him, and then one of the pilots in one of the choppers got shot. and the chopper went down, so we went in and tried to pick it up. The guys that were on the ground, it got so hot in there that we couldn't even land, and we were taking hits, and we just took off and got out of there, and we didn't get very far, and I heard the pilot come over the radio hollering Mayday that we were gonna go in. And anyway, we did make it back to the staging area with 5 bullet holes in the fuel tank, 1 through the main fuel filter and 1 through the fuel gauge in the dash. And anyway, when they did finally get in, the guys in the down chopper couldn't get them out of there. They had to spend the night, but the pilot got killed. He was hit 23 times. And anyway, we found out later that it was, we went into a nest of 30, or it was like 6 30 caliber machine guns and 5 50s that we flew into. But anyway, they finally got them out of there the next day then. That was one of the worst times, but there was several times that we went in and out and took hits, and just luck was that we never got hit. And it ended up well, the year I was over there, none of the guys in the dust off outfit got hit or killed. But right after I left to come back, the crew chief that took my place got shot on Easter Sunday morning in 1967. And anyway, I ended up then, after I got back, they sent me to Fort Rucker to finish out my tour. And that same day, another crew chief and I were together with the MPs. We was guarding down aircraft that crashed. And they picked us up on Easter Sunday morning and ended up and got in a car wreck trying to escort a lady to the hospital because she was hemorrhaging, and ended up in one of the, well, we always call them the maggot wagons. It was the ones that, the sandwich wagons that run around but hit us broadsides going through an intersection. And it ended up, and I got banged up some in there, and to this day I don't know what happened to the MP that was driving the car. But my buddy was in the back seat, and that was the side that got hit, and it took him part on the sedan wrapped around his face and pulled clear open and stuff. And he was unconscious till the day I left out in July. But anyway, it ended up, and he finally come to, and they was flying him to Fort Sam Houston for plastic surgery. So, anyway, I never did get to see him after that, but he did finally look me up and found me. So, but we never did ever get together, and he passed away here a couple of years ago, so it was. But anyway, that was quite an experience, you know, out of them race guys.
Did you get awarded air medals?
Yeah, 18 of them.
I was gonna say, do you remember how many missions you had to have before they,
It was so many takeoffs and landings, I think it was.
do you remember what it was?
It was like, I don't know if it was 25, they always called him, what the heck was it now, sorties and something else that they called it, but it was like, I was thinking it was like 25 times or something like that for each one.
To get an air
And
medal?
then you had to get so many of them or whatever, I don't remember for sure, but that's what I ended up with, was 18 of them. Just kind of several years ago, we tried to figure it out, and that's what we was figuring, was anywhere between 450 and 500 missions that we went in and out of.
Yeah, quite an experience. Phil, what did you in the artillery, wasn't you?
Yeah, I was in the artillery. Well, we had our basic in Camp Pendleton, or San Diego was our basic. And then I was in artillery, and they loaded us on an LSM, two guns, and the crew and about 18 sailors on the LSM. And they was going to Hawaii, they dumped us out in the middle of the ocean. And those old ducks are only about that far above the water. They did maneuvers, and they spent, oh, I don't know, I said 6, 8 months maybe in Hawaii, and then they come back with a boat. And they put us on leave for 30 days, sent us a telegram when I was home. that's when they loaded us up by boat and went to Japan. Well, our outfit only had 6 months left to do, so they shipped us over there. It was stationed right below Mount Fuji. And we stayed there till, I don't know, about 2 weeks before we was gonna be discharged. They sent us back to Frisco to get out. I got out on February 13th, 1954. Well, I was gonna say I was in the service for 2 years, and I had a buddy from Mitchell, South Dakota. It was just like a brother, or maybe better than a brother. And on one of them trips when we was on the boat, we smuggled a quart of whiskey in our baggage. Got one night, went up on the deck and sat there and drank the, the two of us. But his name was Gene Rath. He died when he was only 64 years old, so. Anyway, I put his name on the wall in Crofton, Nebraska.
How did you feel?
Now,
Steve, you were in for quite a while, so you did an abundance of things.
Well, I did a lot of different things. Like you guys, or you, I went to boot camp in San Diego. We used to watch you Marines running next to the Navy boot camp, and thank the good Lord that we hadn't gone that direction.
Here, here.
you're in good shape.
I remember that well.
But
I wasn't in better shape. I was in pretty good shape when I got out of boot camp.
I am sure of that.
Better than I am today.
Did a lot of different things. Submarines, numerous submarines in 30 years. Spent time with a SEAL delivery vehicle unit. My last sea tour was aboard an aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz, that had about 6,000 sailors, both men and women, 85 planes, various flavors of planes, from the F-14 Tomcats to F-18s to carrier onboard delivery. Different shore commands as well. The last one, of course, being over at the Commander-in-Chief Pacific Fleet, where you got to see a lot of different things. Can relate to a lot of the things you guys are talking about. At Sugi Naval Air Station over there. Spent a lot of time in Japan, from Atsugi to Yokosuka, even up at Misawa, which is an Air Force base, but Navy P-3s are up there. Confusion in Vietnam. Stephen Richard Hillis, a guy by the name of Stephen Michael Hillis, was supposed to fly over there in September '72. Somehow they sent me instead of him, so I show up and got no idea what I'm supposed to be doing over there, and nobody had any idea what I was going to be doing, so I understand the confusion. What Tom said about freedom not being free, there isn't a truer statement in my mind than you can find, and how everybody should do something to be allowed to live the life that we lead. We just have somehow forgotten a lot of that with all of the protests for different things, or at least that's how I feel. I'm still doing a fair amount of work around the military, doing things with DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and because of that, I get the opportunity to work around some military bases, both Navy and Army, nothing around the Air Force. But it's amazing to me the difference that you see in an 18 or a 19-year-old soldier or sailor than what you see in the schools, because I still do a little bit of substitute teaching when I have time, because I have a son that's in one of the local schools here. But the appreciation that military member has of what we experience here, and how that young man or young woman looks to folks like those that are gathered around the table, as compared to what many of the young men and women in our high schools and colleges, how they view us. And it's an appreciation of what men like this and women have done to ensure our way of life. And that's something that's lost. I went to a high school where we had a brother Dominic, not a priest, but a brother from the Oblates of St. Francis de Sales. And he used to use this old saying in Latin, and I won't even try to say it, but what it meant was, if you want peace, prepare for war. And that's what we have to do to have the kind of a life that we want for ourselves and our families. Anyway, get off on the philosophy there. But that's kind of what I did. A lot of different things, 29 different countries, had the opportunity to do some interesting things, from jumping out of an airplane to what you would know as scuba diving to having lots of fun. So when you mention Atsugi, I immediately go to in my head to a little bar that we had over there. And somebody here mentioned Hong Kong, and I think of the San Francisco bar. And so I know I shouldn't be saying that because I've got sons that might be watching this at some point, but I think about some of those things, and we have that kind of stuff in common.
Thank you, Steve. But what you were saying and what Tom said before is a very true statement, that our younger generation doesn't understand, I think. I don't know, it's not been talked, World War II was a world war, and a lot of people around here served. They served all over the country. And a lot of people, even if they weren't working for the country, in the service, they did a lot of things. My aunt and my mom, they helped make bombs, build planes, whatever it took. But the whole country, you raised food, you cut back on sugar, all these things that was done. And then we got the Korean War that came in, and that was different. And then Vietnam, different. And then we had Iraq, when we even went into Saudi Arabia or Kuwait, and that's all changed. But to serve your country, and everybody sitting there, it was an honor.
Sure.
And this is a great country. And
one of the things that you're talking about, Steve, and we're very fortunate living here in northeast Nebraska. I had the opportunity to speak at the schools on a Veterans Day, a joint Cedar Catholic and Hartington Newcastle Public School, a joint Veterans Day assembly. And I asked folks to stand up that had an immediate family member that was serving or had served, that had an aunt or an uncle that had served, or a first cousin or closer. And about 90%, not an exaggeration, 90% of the people that stood up. I had the opportunity 2 years ago to speak at my old high school in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I did the same thing. I will bet that there wasn't 10% of people standing up. So your family and your family and your family, they understand because they're exposed to folks like us. But for a large part of the country, that doesn't happen. My son at the Air Force Academy, they bring in 1,200 cadets every freshman year. And the number of parents I met that hadn't served, that had no idea what their sons and daughters were going to be experiencing, it was shocking. It was shocking. And so what you're saying, I am right there and want to be a standard carrier for that's why when Mike said, do you think you might be available next month? I said, let me shift my schedule around, because anytime we get the opportunity to talk to young folks about Vietnam, about Korea, about Japan, about any place we're at, or the things that we did and why we did it, we need to do that. So thanks for inviting me. Excuse me. I'm sorry, I'll get off my soapbox, Steve. Sailors.
You was in the Navy, Tom, you understand.
Don't blame this on me.
All right, I'll keep quiet. Did my wife talk to you guys?
Well, like I said, I was on a new ship, and I did A school in Hawaii after boot camp in San Diego, which I did watch the Marines too, and thank God I was in the Navy. I have so much respect for, I have so much respect for the Marines, what they go through just in boot camp.
guys couldn't take it, could you?
No, no. But, and I'm gonna be honest with you, that's one of the reasons I joined the Navy. I did not want to have to go in country. Because I realized at an early, when I knew I was gonna be drafted, that, you know, it comes, when you have to kill somebody, that's a whole different deal. Or when somebody's shooting at you. But I was gonna serve my country one way or the other. But, like I said, I had boot camp in San Diego, and then went to A school in Hawaii, which was wonderful. And then went to pre-commissioning school in Charleston, South Carolina. And after that, which included firefighting school, a variety of things, shipboard recognition and how you get around on a boat, more or less. And then I went to Boston and commissioned the ship, which was interesting as hell. And then from there we went to Norfolk. After we left the harbor, we went to Norfolk and Guantanamo Bay, which is another unbelievable experience. And then we went to Curacao, San Juan, and then went through the canal, which was probably one of the highlights of my life, going through the Panama Canal. They give you a running tour as you go through. The captain loses account of the ship, control of the ship, and then they have somebody that gives you a running tour of how it was built and everything. And then we came around to Acapulco, and then to Long Beach. And I mean, the experiences you get when you're in the service, for one thing, some of them are horrible, but there's such an education for a kid that's 19 years old. I mean, we pulled into Long Beach in fog that I couldn't see this cup, and all of a sudden the Queen Mary appeared beside me when they first brought it into the harbor. It hadn't anchored it, it hadn't put it in its permanent place yet, but it's a hell of an education, and something that I don't regret. I didn't particularly enjoy my first 2 years because I was young and I was away from home. But then you finally settle in, and I had one experience that kind of defined me. When I'd been in 2 years, there was a deal where you could get out of the Navy if you could declare hardship, that your parents needed you at home. And I was, like I said, I was not enjoying the service. And so I put in for it, and my division officer came to me and I told him what I wanted to do, and he said, well, Lang, he said, I'll sign the papers, but I'll tell you what I want you to do. I want you to wait a week and think it over. And I said, okay. So it didn't take me 2 days, and I'm thinking, I signed those papers. Nobody else did. And he told me, he says, if you do this, just remember, this is going to affect the rest of your life. So what I'm getting at is, with a younger generation, they have to understand, you sign something, you make a commitment, that's your signature. That's the most important thing you can have in your life, is your credibility. And I agree with you guys, I don't know if we have that today. It's kind of sad to see, but, and maybe by doing this and educating them a little more, maybe that'll help. But it's a tough call.
You know, even if this only amounts to that it affects one person, one young man or female, it's worth it. That's one. And that's how it starts. You know, and like you said, the experience we've all got sometimes in here. Like Steve said, he remembers that bar. You know, I went to Sydney, Australia for R&R, and when I got married, I told my wife that I would take her there someday. And we got there. It would be 3 years next January. But unbelievable. You know, what...
Yeah, you can't.
Like Tom said, you know, what the friends, Phil said his friend, you know, I get quite an honor. I do have a Corvette, but Bowling Green, Kentucky, where they have National Corvette Museum for Veterans Day, they call it Vets for Vets, Corvettes for Veterans. So I got 3 of us guys, we're going down there, and we're gonna go in the parade and give a veteran a ride in a Corvette
that's cool.
for Veterans Day. You know, I got a buddy from Tennessee that's coming up, one out of Kentucky can't make it, we'll stop and see him later. But without being in the service, wouldn't have any of this.
Yeah, you never know.
You know, Phil said with his friend, you know, he still stays in touch with his wife.
Yeah.
It's a friendship you'll never lose, and every one of us has that. Bob,
Yeah,
yours.
I got a lot of them, with the internet, they helped us.
Oh, yeah, that's.
I never kept track of where people were from or anything else, but I did remember a lot of the guys' names. And here, 2-3 years ago, we finally decided we was gonna see if we could, find any of them. Well, I knew a little bit about them. I had one guy we found his name, and it was a medic, and he was my medic. But anyway, I knew his last name was Mort, and his first name was Raymond. But anyway, we went on the internet and we found, I think, 2 Raymond Morts in the United States. And we thought, well, we'll try the one in Pueblo, Colorado, because I had no idea where he went or whatever, but he made a career out of service after he left Vietnam. But anyway, then I had a picture of him holding a Arvin soldier, putting him on the chopper. So we sent him a picture and asked him if he was the one in that photo. And it ended up and it was him. And I found one out in Bangor, Maine, and one in Payson, Arizona, and one in Tennessee. I don't remember if there was anywhere else or not, but anyway, that was several, and we always try to get together. Or we haven't got together. 2 of them I did meet, actually 3 of them. The one from Pueblo and one from Payson, because he was coming through one year. He always went out to the Rolling Thunder or the bikers out in Washington D.C. every year. He went 12 times out of 13 years, and that last one he said that was it. He said it was cold and raining all the way out, because that's when he come through here to see me, and we met down in Columbus. But anyway, then he come back, he was going to see the crew chief that was living in Tennessee. He was going to stop and see him. Well, he said it all the way back was raining and wet and everything else. Because he always camped with his bike. He had his tent and stuff with him. He never went to motels and stuff. So he said that was it. He said if he goes again, it's going to go on a trailer. So. And then
Getting older.
The one from Maine, the one from Pueblo, he come through. He was headed out east to see his brother, and he come through here and stopped and stayed in the Argo at Grafton. And anyway, then the one out in Bangor, Maine, he went back for a second tour over there and ended up in a gunship. He was a gunner the second tour. But anyway, he come through that one time. His unit was meeting out in Las Vegas, so he was going to ride his bike. He brought a brand new one of them, I don't know what they call it, one with the 2 wheels in the front and one in the back. But anyway, he took that out there, drove out, and then he got a hold of me and he said, well, I want to meet you somewhere. So he met me down in York on his way back, and we talked for, I suppose it was an hour and a half or so, and he said, well, I got to get going. He says, I don't have my 500 miles in yet today, so. But anyway, he rode that all the way out there and back. But anyway, so I said it was good to find some of them guys back in time. I mean, I recognized them all when I seen them. They hadn't changed that much. But. And then I was going to say one more thing about that when he was talking about the schools and stuff. I said there's so many of these schools ain't telling their government classes or whatever, history, whatever, anything about Vietnam. They hardly ever mention it. But anyway, here, like a couple of years ago or 3 years ago, I had one of the tapes. I don't know if everybody's ever seen it or heard with Big and Rich. Took that guy from South Dakota back to Nam. So did you ever get one of the tapes?
I think I do. Yes,
Yeah, I've got one.
Because I was,
Anyway, I got a hold of it.
I was in Pier for that.
Yeah, for that memorial, that's
Yeah.
where he, but anyway, the guy was from South Dakota. I don't remember where it was, but anyway, they took him back to Vietnam because they brought him home.
Well, I think it was like in Deadwood or someplace like that.
Yeah, it was out
bartender.
west there somewhere, yeah.
That's how they got.
But anyway, yeah, he ended up they took him back, and then it was a whole film they took of going down the canals and everything else. But he went, this one that come back, they brought him back in his boots, never took them off. And he had them hanging all these years in his room with the mud still on it. And then when Big and Rich took him back, then they went back to the place where he had, in a bomb crater there.
Yeah.
And anyway, they went in there and they all had their shot of whiskey and threw the boots and the shot glasses in there and left. But anyway, I give it to the government teacher in Crofton. I said, I'll tell you one thing, I said, before you show it to the class, I said, you go through it. Because I said, I don't think there was any language or anything, it was just the idea of him drinking whiskey and stuff that didn't know if the class could learn it. Now, I don't know if he still got it or took it with him, because he's not teaching up there anymore, he left and went someplace else. But I thought, well, that was a good example to let the kids know what it actually looked like in Vietnam, even though it wasn't in, actually war things, it was all pretty good otherwise. But that's what I said, it's just like they got no idea, the kids got no idea what that Vietnam was.
It was a very controversial time.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, well, Joe knows he was there too.
Yes.
And that's how it is, so, what we can do, and something like this here that the telephone company shows over the television, some kids will get interested in it, and like I said, it just affects one that says, I'd like to serve my country, Steve's family is a military family, and.
As far as drinking, I think everybody drank when they was in the service.
I didn't. Not that much.
I believe you, Steve.
But yeah, that's where I go.
If you didn't drink, you was out of place.
That'd be your manhood, right, Tom? Joe?
Well, I entered the service in April of 1967. I went and took my basic training in Fort Bliss, Texas. That's down by El Paso. From basic, I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey. We talk about a change in climate. Anyhow, I went to wheel vehicle mechanic school there. And then they took the top end out of that and they sent him to Fort Knox, Kentucky to go to tank school or track school. So I went through that. Well, then I had to go through Southeast, well, they called it Southeast Asia training. Well, we knew we were going to Vietnam. But this is the thing that got me. Even the Southeast Asia training, we did all of that with an M14 rifle, which was fine. It was a nice weapon and all that. It was great. Okay, then we had to go and qualify with the M16. I fired exactly 3 rounds with an M16 rifle, and then we were sent to Vietnam. So, okay, I got to Vietnam. I explained that. It was kind of confusion. Well, then I was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division, and their headquarters was in On K, so we was sent there. Well, in order to be a part of the 1st Cavalry Division, you had to know how to rappel out of a helicopter. So went through that training, learned how to do that. And we were supposed to go get our weapons. Well, we went to our unit, we were going to be the 1st and 50th Mechanized Infantry. Well, we went, there was 2, if I remember correctly, I think it was just 2 sergeants there in this building. We said we needed our helmets and our little weapon and that. We're sorry, we don't have anything. No weapon, no helmet, no backpack, nothing. So, well, we went back to our sergeant and told him what the deal was. Well, I don't think he knew what to do either, but he said, guys, well, there was about 3 of us, and he told us, whatever you do, please don't get in trouble. He said, you can go wander around, here at On K, but don't get yourself in trouble. Well, we did that, and we did stay out of trouble. But eventually we got assigned then to our unit. We went to LZ English from there. And then from LZ English, we got on the truck, and they took us to LZ Uplift, was a little outpost, actually guarding the highway there. Anyhow, here we are, no helmets, nothing, no rifles. We got there. And at the time, you don't think about this stuff at all, but later on you do. When I got to my unit, And anyway, then finally I was told one day, well, they had a rifle for me. When I think about it now, I'm sure I had to wait for some soldier in the field to get killed, and I'm sure I got his weapon. You know, that's how tight things were at that time, you know. Well then I actually had to go through training, you know, which I mean, you almost learned it by yourself or from a few other guys to learn how to take care of your fire it, how to clean it, how to take care of your rifle, you know, and your weapon and that. Because, God, I mean, you know, that was your life. I mean, that was your protection. That was all you had to go with, you know. But anyway, there they didn't need track mechanics, but they did need an engineer badly. So that's what I became then, a combat engineer. No training on that either. Well, our big thing at first was generating electricity. Then, I don't know, within a few weeks, all of a sudden we had to purify water. You know, well, an engineer kind of does everything to make it life as pleasant as he can for the infantrymen. That's what it amounts to, you know. So we that was my production. We did actually ended up doing a little bit of EOD work, not very much, thank God, because I hated that. But that's explosive ordnance disposal. But all in all, I mean, I went from LZ Uplift, and they put us into on K, which was a bigger base. And then there I was no longer with the 1st Cavalry Division. I was assigned to the 173rd Airborne. So that allowed me to wear 2 patches. I could wear the 1st Cav patch and the 173rd Airborne patch. Well, I had one benefit from that. When I went on R&R, I was waiting for my plane. I was going to go to Hawaii. And I was just walking around, and I turned around, there was a captain there, and he saluted me. Well, I saluted him back, and he came up, shook my hand, he said, anybody that comes over here twice, that's what he took it was. I was on my second But I learned that basic, you didn't argue with an officer. You
didn't tell him ready to go.
But anyway, then on the last, well, we got into on K, that was a bigger post than that, and eventually, anyway, we didn't have to generate electricity anymore. I forget what the name of this thing was, but anyway, it was just like the REA is here, you know, with the poles and the transformers and all that. You know. But then they had big generating units. What they basically were, these generating units, was just a locomotive engine. Well, it's diesel electric. And I was amazed at how quiet those things would run. I mean, when you drove by them, all you heard was the turbos whistling. You know, it was amazing how quiet they run. That was the last end I had to do anyway. I was sergeant of the guard because I was guarding those things. In February of '69, I planed them back home again. So then I got an early out because they didn't reassign me to any end of the unit. They just discharged me. I was discharged from Fort Lewis, Washington. But on what you guys are talking about, this year at the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Reunion, which was in Columbus, they had a lady there. She's a lieutenant colonel. She was from Fort Carson, Colorado. She was a general's aide there. And she was a helicopter pilot in Afghanistan, this lady. And anyway, she just told us about herself, what she had done. And she originally was from Columbus. I mean, that's where she grew up. But then she just opened it up to questions. You could ask anything. And I asked her how they were doing with recruitment, you know, I mean, whether they were keeping the ranks filled and that. And then the answer she gave me just about blew me away. She said, first of all, and this is with all services, she said anyway, those people that come in and, you know, sign up, they wanna try to get into the service. Only 1/3 of them are actually suitable for service. The rest of them, he said, are obese, you know. No, I mean, you're not talking about an old fat guy like me. These are people supposed to be in their prime, you know. I mean, and I don't know, you know, I mean, she would probably be a little polite. There probably a lot of them were just so hung out on drugs or something too, you don't know. But I mean, there just was only 1/3 of them actually was fit to be.
I just was at a briefing where they talked about it, and military, as you guys know, fiscal year runs October 1 to the end of September. And this last fiscal year, the Army did not make enlisted goal for the first time in I don't know how many years.
She said that it was very tight.
Yeah.
This would have been in August.
What they told us there is that about 35% of the young men and women that are graduating high school today are eligible for the military, either because of obesity, because of police record, because of drug usage, because of asthma or diabetes or all of these different medical ailments. But if you're talking about 1/3 of those that are graduating are still eligible now, things are tight, especially in what they gotta have upstairs on the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery test that they're taking. But when we're looking at 2/3 of the population no longer eligible to go into the military as compared to when all of us went in when the draft was still around and they'd take you sick, lame, and lazy and walk. Yeah,
You gotta
walk in the mirror.
You gotta look at it this way though, if they don't take the average person in the service,
That's true.
you've gotta have brains. You don't need the foot soldiers so much like they used to. You gotta know how to run these machines, and that takes schooling.
Yeah.
Like in basic training, the old sergeant told us, the trouble with you guys is you were 1 block ahead of the law when the draft board got you.
And then it made no difference if you had a record or not, you was in.
Yeah.
And I agree, they should all serve their time in service, regardless of what they do.
Yeah.
Like what we all have is the respect for your country, you know, and just, you know, everybody here has been around, Navy people really been around the world, but how the rest of the world feels about our country too, though, is, you know, the jealousiness of what we have in America, the freedom that we have. And look at the freedom that we've lost since 9/11 happened. You know, and then just keep going back, that our grandchildren will never know the freedom. Look how when you got into the service to get on an airplane, you did it. Drank whiskey in the airport, smoked cigarettes in the airport.
Yeah.
Don't have any of that today. It's changed. Dean?
Well, these fellows are talking about their experiences as far as combat, things like that. And I said before, I was fortunate. I ended up in, when I went to boot camp, we were drafted into the Navy. They needed 3,000 men for November, December, and January. So we have a choice. We could go to the Army or go to the Navy. Well, I was told by some of my relation that don't ever go to the Army. So that's where, my biggest dread when I went to the Navy was learning how to get around that pool to get out of boot camp. I didn't know how to swim at all. And I'll bet you now, to this day, if I would have fell off the ship, I would have drowned. But I did make it around that pool. And then we were, they called us short timers, of course, so we weren't eligible for any schooling. And I put in for naval aviation, because there was another thing, you won't be put on no ship. If you do, you'll get into a big one, a carrier. So that'd be pretty good duty. So I ended up, my orders right out of boot camp, you go to Atsugi. I was 18 years old. I hadn't had any training in mechanics, never went any place but on the farm, fixing maybe a tractor. Well, they put me into the base over there. For the first while, they put me in the education office. I was supposed to type letters to moms. Well, that didn't work very well. Then, after, probably a month or so, and here's another thing that they said, don't volunteer for anything. When you get into service, don't volunteer. Well, I did the opposite. I volunteered to clean up a junkyard. And I was fortunate, that was the turning point of my duty. The chief, petty officer, was on a plane crew. He said, my plane's coming back from overhaul, would you be on the plane crew? Which meant that you were assigned to one plane, you were the mechanic, you did the work on the engines. We had to take care of that plane whenever it was there. Otherwise, we could do about whatever we wanted to on the base. But then after I made third class petty officer, I could get on the flight crew. And that's when I got to fly all over the Far East, you might say. 18-year-old kid set up in there between the two pilots. One of them was a pilot, fighter pilot, had been in Korea during the Korean War, fighter pilot. One of the best the pilots I ever flew. He actually was an alcoholic, but when he got in that plane, he could fly that thing all so well. And then when we would land at the wherever we were landing at, that was our duty to put in fuel and oil in the plane. And they never trusted a fuel gauge in the plane. You had to dip the tanks. That was what you did. You didn't figure there was fuel in the plane. And he would come to the airport, or after we got the plane all taken care of, and he'd say, well, is it ready to go? And I said, yeah. Well, you know what, I don't know what I would have done if it wouldn't have done that. But being on the farm, one night they needed an airplane towed to the terminal. This first class petty officer said, you know how to drive that tractor? And I said, well, yeah, I can drive that tractor. He said, you got to put that plane on you got a square about this big, you put all three wheels on it. He said, the last guy put the wing inside the terminal. So he said, that's all you got to do. That's really all that's important. Just get that turned around and get that in there. So I did it, and I got it on the spots. And he said, you do have a license, don't you? I said, no. He said, tomorrow morning, you go to this place, and he said, before you go, I'll get the answers to the test for you. So that's kind of my story and my duty. I left with a friend of mine from Coleridge. We left together. We all went through boot camp together. We ended up in Japan. He had the top rack, I had the bottom rack. We had a civilian clothes locker together. We ate chow in the chow hall all the time, you know, like you guys probably ate sea rations and all that stuff on the field. We never had to do that. But last Memorial Day, I'm on the honor guard. We buried him in chords. We were together all the time. That town that you're talking about, Steve, was Sagamioska. It had 69 bars and 1 pawn shop. And there was a bar for the Marines, there was a bar for the Navy, and a bar for the Coloreds. At that time, in 1957, you did not go there. Even though you were in Japan, it didn't make any difference, which we really advanced from that kind of thing. And some of my best friends in the squadron were colored. But we also had one that was from the South, that he hated the coloreds. And so this country has changed an awful lot since then. So that's about all I got in my experience. I shot the M1 once. And that was on the Pendleton, Marine base in Pendleton. We had to shoot at the flag. There was a fellow there was from Mississippi, and he was typically didn't really know much. And we had that M1 that, you know, all you had to do is just keep pulling the trigger until the clip was empty. Well, they put the flag up, you're done, he shot that too.
Just in the Navy, right? You understand? That's what you guys did on the water, and you were on the ground.
Talking about that target practice, I was in San Diego there or whatever, and shooting at the bullseye. 10 rounds, rapid fire, and then one. Come through, 9 through the bullseye, and then a Maggie George said, I missed the target. The other one. But 9 went through the little circle.
Well, the 10th one probably went through another bullet.
That's what I was saying. It didn't miss the target.
I got one thing about, he was talking about never had to eat sea rations. Well, I said when we was over there, that's all we ate pretty much, because the chow in the mess hall was never worth the damn to eat. So we find out what was on the menu, and let's go to the chopper, we'll get some sea rations out of there to eat them.
You talk about sea rations, and believe it or not, the Navy actually, especially on submarines, you had to go places where you had to be quiet, so they couldn't be cooking, so there was no banging pots and pans. So we had sea rations, and we had steam turbines providing electricity and also propulsion. But, you know, you'd use that old John Wayne, which is just a can opener, you know, open the damn thing. Well, we put the cans on top of the steam turbines to kind of warm it up a little bit. Well, we had this, you talk officer, we had this new ensign that came aboard, and he puts his up there because he sees us doing it, but didn't open it. So their thing blows up. Now, we're in some place where you get noisy at all, you could get killed, and here he's blowing up cans. So, some of the stories like that, and then you talk about being on an airplane. Now, I did a lot of things, had to, but I hate going up in the air. Even today, when I got to fly, I say a couple of prayers and close my eyes as we're taking off. Well, I was senior enough in P3s, these submarine hunter airplanes, and they got 4 engines on the damn thing, and you got that flight engineer that's sitting up in between the 2 pilots. So they got this bubblehead, that's a submariner in the Navy, standing up there, and my boss controls all the purse strings and all that, and so they're gonna play with me. And I don't know they're playing with me. So we look up, and the pilot looks at the flight engineer, this old E8, and says, "Feather 4." I don't know what the hell feather 4 means until the guy goes click, click, and they shut the engine down. So now we're running on 3 engines. And I'm trying to look cool. Doesn't bother me, not a bit. And he says, feather 3. So now they shut one down on the starboard side. So we're running on 2 engines. Now, rules say you can only shut down 2, but they got a bubblehead up there, so they feathered another one. And now I can't even stay cool, you know, I sweat's bull, and we got 1 engine running, And they're just talking away and talking about what they're gonna be doing when, and I'm saying, what in the hell am I doing here? So, you know, it's always fun, but that's same service P3, so, you know, that was Navy. So you start talking about flying and people shooting at you when you're flying, you know, get me underwater, at least I can swim away from them. Christmas, well, no.
Steve, you maybe were that recruit then that we didn't get back in Okinawa. We're flying down to Okinawa with 2 plane crews, and we never used parachutes. But this one pair, the plane crew that we were going to pick up the new plane from, wore their parachutes down there, of course, instead of carrying them. And we had this young recruit on the plane, and then when you go into Naha, Okinawa, there is no room between the strip and the bay.
Yeah.
And this recruit, he's sitting there alongside this old salt that's got his parachute on. He said, "How come you got a parachute?" "Well," he said, "you know, you never know on these kind of deals." So we're starting to land, and we feather number 1. And that old prop, you know, she just goes straight up and down, and it's dead. Sitting there with no spin at all. And this kid looked out of the window, and he said, "You know, that one out there stopped too." Number 4 was shot down, straight up and down. Boy, that old guy, he gets up and looks at that recruit, and he said, "It looks like we got here just in time." And we come finding to get back on the plane when we're supposed to take them. When you say that about feathering those engines, yeah, that one I flew on would fly on one.
Yeah. You know, they weren't supposed to go down to less than 2 by some kind of regulation, but, you know, they had an old E9 there that was submarine qualified and all this other kind of, and to be completely open, we had taken this flight crew out on this fast attack submarine and did angles greater than 30 degrees and up and greater than 30 degrees down, and we had them standing on a freshly waxed floor, and so they were paying me back a little bit. So being completely open, but I'll tell you, I was, you know, it's a good thing that I had an extra pair of underwear, because when they shut down that 3rd engine, I was not one happy person. I'm thinking, damn, I don't mind dying, but I don't want to die like this. Airedales.
That was one of my biggest disappointments. I had an opportunity, we were doing training, before you go overseas on a Westpac, you would go through a lot of training to make sure you're ready, which you were ready anyway, but we were refueling the USS Midway off the coast of San Diego, and we were alongside, which is a hell of an experience, but that's what we did. And they were launching and recovering aircraft while we were alongside them, which was cool as could be. Well, they came, I was in a quartermaster, so I was on the bridge all the time. And I knew the captain well. I mean, I was around him all the time. And it came over across the radio that they would take somebody up for a flight. So I went to him right away because I was right there, and I said, "I'll go." And he said, "I'd send you, Lang, but we can't. You're not an officer." So they sent a guy, a friend of mine that was an officer. He went up and he came back, and his eyes were like this when he came back. I believe that's an A6, isn't it, where they sit side by side?
A6 with 4 of them, actually.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
But anyway, he came back and he was telling, and it was so disappointing to me. I don't know if I'd have lived through it, but I would have went.
Yeah.
But to see aircraft carrier alongside you launching and retrieving aircraft, those are some brave men that do that stuff.
That's over down our medevac chopper pilots.
Oh, boy.
They were, you know, I was in the field of the infantry, and they would come in from one side and take rounds and say, "We'll come in from the east, we'll come in from the north, we'll come in from the south." They just kept coming back, and they just kept getting shot at. You know, they were special. They did not want to leave that wounded man or that dead man there. They wanted him out. They were.
And that was always the bad part about it. The enemy had a good target,
Yeah.
that Red Cross. The gunships or the two gun platoons that we had where I was stationed, they definitely wanted to put crosses under rocket pods, because they'd go in on low level around the tree lines and everything else trying to get shot at. They never get shot at. We'd go fly in low level, we'd get shot at all the time. But that was, they wanted that, but Geneva Convention said, no, you can't do that.
You hear stories about the chopper pilots and the different people that are putting their lives at risk. And I had mentioned earlier that I have a son that's at the Air Force Academy. And one of the things they talk about is a guy that has since passed away, but he was a janitor, a custodian, I guess is the right term today, politically correct. But at the Air Force Academy, cleaned the dorms. And this is years ago now, but one of the cadets knew this guy, knew his name. They always said, hey, and just went by him. But he had to do for one of his military classes a write-up on Congressional Medal of Honor winners, awardees, I should say, and saw that name. And so he reads it and goes and asks, is this you? And the guy just very shyly kind of said, yeah. And if you Google it, you can read about this guy, but here's a guy that's a custodian that was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for something that he did in World War II, but he never talked about it. He just said, I did what I had to do. And so many of the men and women, like the pilot you're talking about that was down in Columbus, you just do what you have to do because your country has put you there. And to me, the men and women that deserve the most praise are probably the ones that do the least talking. And it's just important to me.
They're just around here, you know, and we don't have that many people like they do on the coast, you know, New York, 7 million, 9 million people, you know, that's put 5 states around here together, and we don't have that many people. But we have a lot of heroes that done extraordinary things. And I'm not just saying in the infantry, you've got a lot of different branches that they did that are real heroes that you never hear about. You know, where, you know, where there's more people that the television and news media can really, but you would do that with somebody around here, well, you know, we don't have that many people. There's a lot of heroes.
There's a lot of stories.
You did what you were told when you were in
And, right.
regardless, right, wrong,
Well, when you were in a situation, the last thing on your mind was getting a medal. You were trying to survive that.
You was gonna take care of your buddy.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what, in the infantry, you know, we have the saying, war is hell, but combat's a real mother.
Yeah.
And it is so different. And yet, you talked about the good times, the funny things. We had got into a little firefight, ambush type deals. The guy got a piece of shrapnel through his cheek here, and it just instantly swelled up. Well, you remember the old cartoons, how they put the bandage around and tied the bow? That's what we did to him. We set him up and took pictures. He had a hole in his cheek, and they were making fun of it, you know. That's just what you did, the different things that, and you did that in any part of the service to lighten up
Yeah, you say
the
you
bad
had to
situation.
survive.
you had your jokes.
Yeah.
Well, you were 19, 20 years old.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you were kids, you know.
Yeah.
I look at my grandsons that are that old, you know. My one grandson graduated from high school and went into the National Guard, and he's into the engineering side of it, you know, to help with his schooling and things, but it's so different. I went down to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for his graduation, and the drill sergeant of the cycles, the master, the one that was the top, was a female, you know. And so I asked him, and he said, yeah, they had, I think he had 6 girls in his platoon. Had their own dorm rooms, you know, where, you remember
Oh, yeah.
what it was back when he was in. But that's just the difference in what. And, them lady drill sergeants could bark as loud as the man drill.
Oh, yeah, shit, down there, when I was down at Rucker, they had a basic training for the wax. Holy cow, you thought the men were bad at language and stuff. That was terrible what they come out of that place. Jesus Christ, it was nuts.
It's a different military today. 1,200 freshman cadets, class of 2021 at the Air Force Academy, and over 30% are female. The commandant of cadets, a 1-star brigadier general, is a female bomber pilot. And it is just a different world, and it's a
really changed.
All different than it was.
I have a grandnephew that, well, he joined the National Guard and his unit got activated and got sent over to the Middle East. Anyway, I asked his dad how he's doing. Oh, he said he's doing fine, and he's going to sergeant school now. I just had to have a laugh about this because when I was in Vietnam one morning, the commanding officer came out to me and he says, I need a sergeant and you're it. Great school together.
Yeah.
promotion by attrition is what it becomes.
He was talking about that. I've been carrying that ever since I was in.
There's a John Wayne.
I still got one.
I got
I do too.
I've always got that way with that and nail clipper, and the only thing I don't carry anymore is the church key. And I've got the one I have now, I think they're all hanging there on the ring. All rusty.
That was your survival
P-38.
That's P-38.
Yeah.
You don't need a church key anymore, Brandon.
That was your survival equipment.
Yeah.
It feels good to be able to say John Wayne, and I'm sitting here with 7 folks and everybody knows what it was. Whereas if you were just with 7 folks, any place but a VFW or a Legion Hall, and you said John Wayne, they'd say, oh yeah, I like his movies.
Yeah. Got another one, just what was the most memorable experience, I guess, good, bad, or ugly?
Well, I think the best one I could probably think of is our instructor pilot. And he always come and got me to take the pilots up for their auto rotations and hard landing fields. And anyway, one day we had to fly to Saigon for a supply run. And him and I went, and I flew co-pilot. And anyway, when we got everything loaded up that we went after and everything, we headed back to our home base. And he asked me, looked over at me, he said, you know how to fly this thing? And I said, yes, sir, I can fly it. Okay, he said, grab the stick and get your feet on the pedals. He said, it's yours. He said, what's our heading back home? I told him, okay. So I was flying it in a chopper. And anyway, I thought, holy cow. I looked over at him one time and here he's sitting there reading the paper. I kept on flying and pretty quick he fell asleep. I thought, holy camolies, what am I supposed to do? Well, I was flying back to our home base and I had to clear the radio towers, so I did. I cleared and told him who I was, and everything went back. And then pretty soon here he was coming into our home base. And I thought, well, what the heck do I do now? So I called the base and told him who it was and coming in on final approach, or which runway to use, and told him, I said, well, I'm coming in on final approach. And was going in, landing that sucker, and I thought, well, I wonder how this is going to work. And anyway, about that time he woke up and he looked around and he said, where are we at? And I said, well, I'm on final approach, sir. Looked around a little bit, he says, take her in. So I think that's the one thing I really remember. A lot of the stuff, I mean, there's a lot more things too, but yeah, that one there was something I thought. But they always made sure, the pilots always made sure that the crew chief knew how to fly the chopper if they got shot and had to crawl in and out of the seats to take over the chopper. But that was, I said, it was enjoyable, yeah. You know, I said I actually had, when I got back, I said it wouldn't have been so expensive. I might have went on to school, but, because I had 40 hours log stick time on the chopper, so. But,
Wow. Phil?
No,
A memorable moment or experience or character?
I have no idea what to tell you. There were so many of them. Well, I'll tell you what, on that going when I went to Hawaii with those ducks and artillery, there was 15 of us and the crew members and about 16 sailors on that. You know, you went through the chow line for breakfast in the morning, if you wanted ham and eggs, if you wanted bacon and egg, or whatever you wanted, you got it. You didn't have to eat what they dish you. You did what you wanted, that was fun on that. But otherwise, it was nice when I got out. But I was glad I went and served my country the best I could. So,
Very good.
yeah.
Steve? I imagine had a couple of them. haven't you?
Yeah.
30 years, you see a lot of things, but I was with a special unit, and you sent out, special command, you sent out small units, and you had to fill out these sheets, so that if something happened, they would know what to do, and one of the things that you did put down is somebody that you knew that was a friend, and we had a guy that was reasonably new, an African-American, and he enlisted me only because we played basketball together. And he didn't come back, and we had to go tell his wife, and so you have a chaplain and somebody that's going to be the Keiko, that's kind of a professional at it, and then they sent me as the command representative. And he was in Navy housing, and you go up there, and the screen door was closed, but the regular door was open, and she saw us, saw the car pull up, and saw the chaplain get out. And I will never forget the wailing that started when she saw us. And you talk memorable moments, and you know, I didn't know her, and I only knew him from playing basketball. But that's something that has always stuck with me. Changed the way I look at a lot of things.
My captain that I had over in Vietnam, we found about 10 years ago, and he emails something every day, and we talk once, twice a month, 3 times, whatever. But he had to do that when he come back, and that, he said, was the hardest part of his 30 years in the service. Was, and like you said, you didn't know the people. It didn't make any difference, because it's just like a brother to you. I mean, they're serving their country and give the ultimate sacrifice.
You know, 66 years old, and I think about it now, and I still
Yeah,
tear up.
Yeah. You know, we don't think about them things, but the side where they have to bring the people that have to bring the bodies back, the corpsmen, the medics that, you know, I didn't realize it, but they had morticians, you know, in Vietnam. I got a friend of mine that went to school to be, is a mortician, and he talked about that, some guys that went there and did that, you know, and, you know, war is war, you know what happens, and some of this, you never forget that, you know, that's the ugly side of it. Tom?
That's a hard one to follow. I have a little bit lighter note that,
Well, that's,
which I had a lot of experiences too, but we were coming back from one of our Westpacks, and we were, like I said, I was on the bridge all the time, and we were about 250 miles off the coast. And it happened to be the Saturday Nebraska played Oklahoma in the game of the century. And our big worry was whether we were going to be able to pick up that signal to watch the game. Well, I had the 8 to 4 watch in the morning, so I got off at noon, and the last word I got was we were going to get it, so I went down to the mess decks, and everybody was down there waiting for the game to start. And I may have said something about that I was from Nebraska. And there wasn't a lot of people that was rooting for Nebraska because they were pretty well convinced Oklahoma was gonna win that game. Well, I took a few bets that day, which I was very willing to do, and the last thing I remember when Nebraska won is I jumped on one of my buddy's shoulders and was beating him on the head because he was a diehard Oklahoma fan. And that was one hell of a nice way to come home.
Good one. Joe?
I've just been thinking about it, but I think the one thing that really sits in my mind is, well, we had when I was on K, there was a little LZ out, I don't know, about 5-10 miles out of on K. It was called LZ Shore. And we did the first 50th, they had, I think, a company there. And they had a generator there, a 10 kW generator that they run, you know, for radios and that. And anyway, we had, in the past, we'd had, you know, in fact, I even made one run out there in the middle of the night sometimes to change out that generator, you know. So I told the captain, I said, well, we gotta do, I said, let's put this on a rotating basis, that we let that generator there, I forget what it was, week to 10 days or so. We go out there, we take another one there that's all serviced and ready to go and pick that one up and bring it back and service that. So that's ready to go. So yeah, he thought that was a good idea, so that's what we were doing. And I took one of the men with me, his name was Reinhardt. I don't really remember where he was from anymore. The only thing I do remember is, I know his name is on the wall now in Washington. But anyway, these were just heavy enough that you couldn't really handle them by hand. So anyway, we had a guy by the name of Metcalf. He was running the wrecker, they called it. Well, an Army wrecker, they had a boom on that you could rotate and you could lift stuff up. And so anyway, we went out with two vehicles, a truck with the generator on, Reinhardt and I at Metcalf, we went out to change out this generator. And we just got it done. We got got it changed, got the generator loaded back up on the truck, and I went to the captain and I said I was getting ready to leave. We just walked up there, and the guy come running up and he said, "Sir, I think we're getting hit. Those guys over there are running." So, well, that was it. I took off, then back to my truck, and there was a little bunker there. So I made sure I got Metcalf, and Reinhardt had to get in there first because I was ranking, so I had to be the last one in. So I was laying by the door. And anyway, they were walking in the mortar rounds on us. Well, all of us had been in Vietnam long enough that we knew, you know, you about had this timed out. And I had us figured that, well, that next one was about going to be a direct hit, you know. Because the one that did hit was outside, and that was the closest I came to a Purple Heart. It was a piece of shrapnel on my soul, my boot. But anyway, we were laying there, and well, Metcalf, he claimed to be an atheist. And in fact, he went as far as to make fun of us if we went to church or something. But Reinhardt, I seen his dog tags and it said no preference, which that doesn't mean he doesn't believe in God, you know. So there we are, and I'm there, Metcalf, or Reinhardt, and then Metcalf. I guess when I pray, my lips must move or something, but then Metcalf, he looked at me, "Are you praying?" And I said, and shook my head, you know. And about that time, Reinhardt, he had had enough, and he reached over and grabbed him, and he, "Shut up and let him pray, you goddamn fool." Well, this really wasn't all that funny, but that was the one that hit outside, that was the last round. Then when gunships came in, and that was it. But that was the one thing that sticks out in my mind.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Dean?
When on the base, we had all propeller planes, And on I never forget the wording above the urinals. Aircraft is unmercifully forgiven of human error. You know, you just read that every time you went to the bathroom. And one night, it was dark, and when you guide planes in off the runway, you use these wands. I don't know, they're a light that shines in the air, you know. So this one guy, he comes in, we were close to the runway. He borrowed the wands to guide this plane in. And he walked into the propeller. There was nothing. I mean, he picked the rest of him up in a propeller. So, I still can see those words on that, and that's what kind of the worst thing I ever got to human tragedy, I suppose you'd call it. But
Never forget it. On the lighter side, I was in the infantry. I had some experiences, kind of wild, but our forward observer, Lieutenant Diebel, and our Captain Moon, Lieutenant Diebel and I wrote up some awards for Captain Moon, so I was kind of close to him, and I knew the captain real well. I'd done some things, but Diebel found out when his birthday was the 15th of December, and we were moved back into Libby Land for 2-3 day stand down, and so he told me that Moon's birthday was the 15th. He said, we should do something. He said, I can get the artillery to fire illumination and some HE rounds, some phosphorus or whatever. He said, you think you can get the mortars to do that? And I said, yeah, I can get the mortar guys, the 81s. I said, I know the guy over in the Four Deuce, and I knew everybody in my company pretty well. So I went around to all the bunkers, and at midnight, we decided to open up with M16s, M50s, the M60s. Everybody had pop flares, so we was gonna shoot pop flares. Artillery was gonna shoot off. The mortars were gonna go off, banging in Captain Moon's birthday. Moon didn't know anything about this. He was down in the headquarters at top with the colonels when this shit hit the fan. We lit the sky up. It was cool. But man, did he get in trouble. He said, I just about went back to a private kind of.
Happy birthday.
We had just been in, we got in that afternoon, and so we were socializing a little bit. I think the whole base, our little fire base there, everybody was up, and we even threw grenades over the wire. We did everything. It was just things that a guy did to break the monotony of what was going on. It was quite something. Been here, it's a little longer. Just any closing comment you got to say about anything?
I really like this here and stuff, and I just was going through all this stuff. I thought one thing that I mentioned or didn't mention on that Easter Sunday when the guy that took my place as crew chief, they went out on that mission, and Dick was supposed to be on that. I don't know if I ever told you that. Because all the while, he was my classmate, and we run into each other. He was stationed at the same base that I was on over there. And I just happened to see him one morning. We was all out getting ready our orders and stuff, and he was walking down the edge of the runway, and I seen him. But anyway, I went up and just fell right out of formation and hollered at him and went over and talked to him. But anyway, all the while I was over there, he wanted to be on one of the missions sometime, and they was leery of taking him along and stuff. Well, then after I left, I didn't know what happened, but I found out later on that Easter Sunday morning he was supposed to be on that, and something come up that he didn't go. But that was the one where the chopper got shot down, the crew chief got killed, and one of the pilots got hit in the leg. But he was supposed to be on that one that Easter Sunday morning. So, but I said brings back a lot of stuff talking about all the different things here. I said, I really enjoy it. And I said, I never did listen to it, but I got a tape at home. Here, I don't know if it was like 3 or 4 years ago at one of the reunions, the vet center out of Lincoln had their big van out there, and they were asking people to tell their stories. Well, I sat down and they taped it all, and I started from when I got out of high school till when I got back or to the date, and I've never sat down to listen to it. But they sent me a CD, and it's in the National Archives now. They wanted stories to go in there so it wouldn't be forgotten, so. But otherwise, this was enjoyable today, listening to this.
Good,
I liked it.
good. Thank you, thanks for coming. Philip?
Yeah. What do you want?
Got any closing comments?
Oh, like I said before, I was along with this buddy, he was from Mitchell, South Dakota. We were together for them 2 years. He meant more to me than any of my brothers. Because he would do anything for me and I did anything for him. We went through that 2 years together. When he was married, when we stayed stationed in Japan, he borrowed $40 from me to buy his wife a set of dishes to send home. But I never ever did ask her now, lately if she still got that set of dishes. But I was, like I said, I was glad I did what I did and served my country, and I still think everybody should do something. And that's about all, I guess.
Thanks, Philip.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. Steve?
I agree with everything that has been said to this point. I don't regret a minute of the time that I spent in the Navy. But when I think back about it, the things that I remember are the people. And the things that you do, not even for God and country, but for that man that's on your left and the man that's on your right. And you talk about your friend in South Dakota and the travel I do now. I get in trouble if somebody finds out that I was in a town and didn't give them a call.
Well, what I liked about my outfit that time was the captain and the first lieutenant. They were all come up through the ranks. And no officer school training or anything. They treated us good.
Yeah.
And that was nice. They knew what was going on.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming. Thomas?
I'd say the same thing. I think this is real nice you do this. Pretty much what we said earlier, that a lot of the younger people need to know in some way, because if it's not on their phone, they don't. And it's nice you do this. I think it's necessary. And I do thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for coming, appreciate it. Joe?
Well, I do think that I did enjoy this. I mean, there's a ton of stories out here in Cedar County. If we could just could find the people and could talk to them, you know, and a lot of them are pretty, I've run onto a few of them. But I feel too that everybody should be required to serve their country some way, somehow. And like a guy told me one time, he said, a veteran told me this, he said, I wouldn't give 50 cents to go on another tour. But he said, well, in my experience, I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. He said he was that proud of what he'd done. And that's the way it is for me too.
I think that's a common for veterans. It's something that we have. You know, we were never together, not in the same branch of the service, but we're comrades. And I don't care when, where, or what, but you served your country, so you're a comrade to all of us. It's just something that we have, that people that don't never have that feeling or that you know, and I can remember when Tom come home. I got home in 70, you know, and there was a ton of us guys, you know, from around here that were in the service at that time. And,
More so than not.
yeah, yeah.
By far.
And, you know, and we did have fun when we got back.
You thought you did.
I know I did.
I know I did. We had fun together.
But no, Dean?
Well, I agree with everybody, what they've said, and I think that we've got young boys and girls in our communities now that if we need them, I know they will step forward. And that's what I like to say to the youth, that when the time comes, if it's your turn, take off. If you're 18, 19 years old, you're in the prime of your life, and yet you're not scared. Like all of us here were not scared. And that's a part of youth. You might be a little rebellious here to your teacher or something, but you'll straighten out, and you'll go to take care of your country, whether it's maybe it's a 9/11 thing or something like that. I still have a lot of faith in our youth. And thanks for letting me come.
Well, thank you for coming. I'd like to thank Harts and Hart Telco for having us again, and they'll run, like they said, they'll run this over Veterans Day for 2018. It's good. I appreciate all you guys for coming, and I appreciate, you know, we all serve. And that I know with I have one grandson that's 6 years old, and he just Veterans Day last year, their school, they had to draw a soldier, and he got involved in it, and he was wondering so I called Captain Moon, and he sent him some stuff and a picture of him, and he's just fanatic about that. Now all these brothers, you know, we heard from Captain Moon, you know, and it's quite something. He ended up as a major, you know, but he's always just been Captain Moon, and it's really funny but it started on Veterans Day last year, and he still wound up, but he sent him a P-38, you know. He's just proud as can be of that, you know, and has never met the man. When he was here, he came and did our veterans speech up here about 4 or 5 years ago. Trevor was too young then, but he just...
I have to agree with Dean too about the youth. My son has taught his kids how to stand at attention for the national anthem, which is no small thing anymore. They stand with their hand on their heart and their other hand behind their back, and they don't move, and they respect it. So they're out there. You know, they're out there.
Oh yeah, yeah. They had I seen a good video on our respecting the flag the other day from, you know, it was a black person that was saying it, and was saying about what happened at the National Football League and how wrong that is in this country. You know, it was very good. But I'd like to appreciate and thank you for all coming. Thanks for the Hart Telco for having us, and happy Veterans Day.
Same to you.
There's one thing I'd like to say. When I first got back, I went to the schools, and I don't know how many times I went, but it was all the little kids. And I had about 600 slides that I had taken while I was over in Nam. And I went through and talked the whole thing through, what everything was and everything. And those kids just, and I wonder how many of them remember today. It's got to be 50 years ago when I did that.
50
But it was, I mean, they really enjoyed it. But I said, I wish when I did it the first 2 or 3 times that I'd have put it on tape. And then just had it worked in with it and played it back. Because now today, if I went through them now, I'd have a hard time remembering what all the stuff was. But
You know, you say that, and you don't know how many of them remember it.
Yeah.
And yet, my son that's up at the Air Force Academy, there's a picture in Cedar County News with him with an Army helmet on and a flight jacket saluting. And it was at Veterans Day when Andy Tilfelski, the senior Navy SEAL at the time, he was still on active duty because I hadn't been retired very long, came out and talked at our schools and did some things. The first person my son called after he was accepted into the Air Force Academy was Andy.
Andy?
And it was because I think of when he was 5 years old and, you know, it just stuck with him. And so you affect people every time you get the opportunity to talk to them or they see that Vietnam veteran patch on your jacket or whatever it is, it affects them. And we just don't always realize it, and very seldom do we get to see the results, but I am convinced that it affects them. So what you did then, you don't know, and probably never will, yeah, what it did, but I know it did some good.
Well, when I go shopping, a lot of times I'll wear something that, like a cap that you can see I'm a veteran. I'm surprised at the young people that'll come up and
Thank you for your service. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I get that all the time too.
That part is
That makes
changing,
you
you
feel
know, the Afghanistan, Iraq, Irani war over there, they activate a lot of our National Guard, which has always been more of just a home front. People that never left, just help with things around the United States, and now they have to go off for 6 months a year. You know, it's really a different National Guard than it was when we were in. Joe, you know, and Tom, you know, you Steve, it's a lot different today. And there's mixed emotions I have on, you know, when they come up today and say, thank you for your service. You know, where was that 50 years ago, Tom?
That's right.
I have no idea.
I don't know where you guys came back to, but they flew me back into Travis Air Force Base.
That's
On an old C-141, you remember those? No. But we came into Travis and you went into a classroom and they told you were going to San Francisco International and you're going to be flying home and all of that. And to not say anything to anybody, you were supposed to act like you had no idea what was going on with the military. They put you on an Air Force bus and we had people that threw red paint on that Air Force bus. And the signs, you know, baby killers, and it was just a different world that we came back to, and I am so glad that is done. And when I'm someplace and you get that old retired military ID card, like you go to Home Depot and you get 10% off. And so I'll use that and they say, thank you for your service. That's what I think of, is how glad I am that it's not like that anymore. That the young men and women today that are willing to go into harm's way come back, and it's the gratefulness instead of the kind of stuff that everybody at this table had to put up with.
Well, and that was our era, I don't know.
Well, think about 1968, what happened in that 1 year.
Oh.
You had 2 assassinations of Kennedy. You had the Democratic Convention that was a disaster.
Chicago.
You had Martin Luther King, and you had the Vietnam War, all really peaking at that time. And
Kent State happened then?
yeah, it was right in there too.
You're right, yeah.
I think it was a year.
Yeah.
But you can understand why people were confused and mad.
I've heard it said that there was more news that year than they could report. Yeah, it was about the way it was too, I mean.
Yeah, Ted Offensive was 68, that was the worst one.
Yeah.
Yep.
I flew right into that.
Wrong time. Bad time. Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Thanks for
doing
doing this too. Thanks for the 38-foot flag
Oh,
up there too.
yeah. I worked a
Couldn't
long
believe
time
it
for
said
that.
that.